All
Hey,
right.
hello, hello.
Hello. Um, Today we have a special treat. This is David Ellis, live from London. I'm Michael A. Muller. We just wanted to talk about some of our records and some of our listening habits. We're new friends, discovered each other through the YouTube and the vinyl community, and I recently met in London at a concert. I think we have some great overlapping musical taste, and this will just be a very casual, free-form conversation. We'll talk about some of our favorite records and how we got into music and listening and vinyl in particular. So my name is Michael A. Muller. I'm a musician and composer, and I play with an ensemble called Balmorhea and also do solo music under my own name. And
Okay.
uh, and who are you?
And I'm David Ellis. I'm a graphic designer. I live in London. I work on my own these days, although for most of my working life, I worked with a collective called Why Not Associates. And I've done all kinds of things from like designing postage stamps to huge crate kind of typographic installations on buildings and public art spaces. And I design a lot of books. I've designed a few record sleeves, but not many.
Oh, really?
Um, yeah. Um, yeah. I always my my brief kind of introduction into doing that was not as creative as I'd hoped. But I think that's more to do with the way record companies were traditionally run, if you know what I mean.
Hmm. Is,
Um,
is that
Go on.
something you would want to do more of if the opportunity
Yeah, no,
presented?
I'd love to do more of under the kind of right circumstance. I did a lot of work for a choreographer over here called Rosemary Butcher, and her way of commissioning me was my favourite way for a creative person. So um, she would she would come to me and say, "I'm making this dance piece." I mean, her work's very abstract, put it this way, and she really didn't want pictures of dancers on her posters or things that were particularly representative in that way. So she would just come to me and say, I'm doing this dance piece. I've read this book. I've seen this painting. I've been listening to this piece of music. It's inspired me to make a piece. Here's the book. Here's a copy of the painting. Here's a CD with the music on. Just go away and create some graphics that comes from the same starting point, and they will find, they will have a symmetry, and that was great. Uh, by comparison, some of the work I did in the music industry was kind of like, we want the band on the cover. We've spent quite a bit of the budget retouching the band. You know,
Hmm.
where would you like to put the type?
Yeah, exactly.
And that wasn't particularly creative, really. And
Right.
then there was a marketing department that had an idea about how it should go. There was an A&R department that had another idea how it should go. Then there was the band who wanted nothing to do with that. And they really wanted their friend that they met in art school to do the sleeve anyway. So they didn't really even want me in the process.
Hmm.
So, from my perspective, it was like, yeah, this isn't much fun, you know.
Interesting.
But
I see
I
it.
think that's just big record companies. That's not everybody's experience, obviously.
Yeah. With Balmorhea, we've always worked pretty closely with the artists and the designers, which is quite nice. And
Yeah, I
it's
think
better
that's the
when
way
it's
it should be.
more direct without multiple layers of people involved that don't understand the vision or what you're trying to accomplish as an
Yeah,
artist.
or have an idea of marketing you in a particular way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I see a reel to reel player behind you. How did you get to music and into analog playback, as it were?
Uh, it's getting to me. Well, lots of touch points. I think when I grew up, so I was born in 1962. Um, One of the ways as a kind of as a teenager that you kind of um, told people about who you were and what you were into was music. It was one of the big kind of things that would differentiate you from your parents and some of your peers. and um, music was just a big thing. All my friends were obsessed by music and bands, and going to see them when we could, or saving up our money to buy records. And it was a big thing. It's obviously pre-gaming, which obviously takes a lot of young kids, it diverts them in that thing as well. So music has to compete with gaming, pre-internet. So it was quite a kind of thing to kind of fixate on, and would define a way of defining yourself, I guess. And in terms of analog music, records were the only thing worth thinking about in those days. I mean, I have a reel-to-reel player because I used to lust after one of these things in hi-fi shop windows. As a teenager, I'd press my nose against the window, kind of like, oh my God, that looks beautiful. One day I'll have one of those. So a few years back, a friend of mine was selling some gear and said, you don't want to buy anything, do you? And so he sold me that at a very good price. And I use it occasionally, but it's kind of it's like having a painting for me. It's a beautiful object, It's a beautiful piece of industrial design. I have some. I buy them occasionally, but the really kind of high-end ones are really expensive. You pay like £450 for an album or something.
Right.
It's
got to be one you love, right?
Yeah, exactly. And usually they're not the ones I love that get put onto those tapes.
Yeah. That brings me to a point. I think I found you through a recommended feed through YouTube, just because I watch a lot of people talking about records and music and hi-fi reviews and record pressing reviews and things like that. And I somehow stumbled upon you maybe a year or so ago, and was really drawn to the dynamic range of the genres you listen to, which overlaps a lot with my own listening. So I felt like an immediate rapport with you, and a beautiful presentation in the way you present the simplicity and kind of sparseness in the way you articulate your speech and talk about the music itself. So, yes.
Yeah. Well, similarly, watching your channel and discovering your music, it was clear to me that we definitely have some big crossover points, and you've introduced me to some bands that I've really loved for a long time. And then I think I discovered you because you were talking about a band that I'd loved for some years. So I used to run an office with usually about 8 people in there. And one of the great things about that was that the young guys who worked for us would come in with new music all the time. We'd play music all day long in the office at a moderate level, but we had quiet spaces to go to if you wanted to write or do other things. But usually you can design and listen to music. So one of the young guys started playing some records by the American Analog Set.
Yeah.
And then I noticed that you'd mentioned them in an album. In a video that you made with, I think, somebody else.
Yep. With a guy named Dominic.
That was,
I believe.
Yeah.
Speaking of thread.
And so that I think that's where I noticed you.
Oh, and, great! I was just talking about
some of your other things. We clearly had this kind of shared interest in certain things.
Yeah. I was just talking about American Analog Set this morning with my bandmate Rob, who lives in Austin. He ran into Andrew Kinney, who's the singer and guitarist, and they recently had their catalog rights acquired by the Numero Group label, who are in the process of doing a full discography box set of all their LPs. So hopefully that will come in the springtime.
Wow!
Apparently,
that's exciting.
They're in the process of approving all the test pressings, which is great because all of those original LPs are quite expensive and hard to find.
Yeah, you're telling me
these days. Yeah.
And you add on shipping from the States, and then I'm kind of thinking, I'd like it, but
yeah, I hope. Yeah. I mean, I think Numero Group has worldwide distribution, or at least partnership distribution in the UK. So hopefully, we'll keep our eyes peeled for that one. That would be incredible to get.
Sure.
I mean, I will say,
Go on.
Oh, I was just going to say, for all the things we're talking about, as well as our channels, we'll leave some links in the description of this video too. For any of you who are unfamiliar, you can check out and listen to some of the music we're discussing if you're not already up to speed on it.
Cool.
So we sort of had a loose concept here to talk about a few of our favorite albums or seminal music that kind of has stuck with us throughout our years of listening. And do you have an album you want to start off sharing?
Yeah, I guess I do. I think to start with, it's worth saying I found that incredibly different when you said pick 3 of your favorite albums. It's like, yeah, that's not easy. So there are 3
favorite at the moment.
Amongst 3 amongst many albums that I'd call favorites, but I kind of thought I'd pick 3 quite different ones. And the first one I was going to show was this chappie here, which is Alexi Murdoch, and Time Without Consequence. This is a kind of repress that was pressed last year, and a bit like you saying, analog set are going to be repressed. Thankfully I didn't buy one from the original issue of that, because they were going for like hundreds and hundreds of dollars. And I was like, okay, well, I just got to accept the fact I'm never going to own that on vinyl. I can't justify, splashing that much cash on one record, even though I love it. So I was really delighted when it got reissued last year, to the point where I bought the black vinyl and the colored vinyl version, just in case one was significantly better than the other.
And what did your ears tell you?
I can't tell the difference.
Okay.
One's on blue vinyl, one's on black.
Yeah. I remember, is it a song called Orange Sky? Is that on there? Or Blue Sky?
Yes, it's the final. It's the final one on there. And for people who don't know him, he's an artist. He lives in Scotland now. I think he spent some time in the States studying, and it's predominantly what you would call a folk album, I think. I discovered this album because my son was playing part of it. Again, my son was playing a part of it, and I said, "Oh, that's really nice. Who's that?" And he said, "Oh, that's Alexi Murdoch." I said, "I've never heard of him. He really reminds me of John Martin." I said, "What it really reminds me slightly of is some songs from this album, Solid Air from John Martin."
Beautiful cover.
And Tom said, "I've never heard of John Martin." So I ended up loving this Alexi Murdoch album, and he ends up loving that John Martin album for the same kind of reason, really. For me, both of those albums are practically perfect albums. Like every song on there is just perfect. It's got quite a consistent tone throughout. So if I'm in a particular mood for this album, then it's perfect. There are some great albums which have some really fast tracks and then some ballads, and although I kind of love them, finding the time when that's the perfect album to put on is fairly rare for me. I'm either in the mood for something to drive to, or to sit and listen to with a glass of red wine, or that gets me going in the morning when I'm kind of wanting something to kind of kickstart my day, or there are kind of different mood points that music kind of syncs with or doesn't. And so albums that have a consistent vibe to them really kind of work for me. And this one, his voice is beautiful. The playing is lovely. It's really well recorded. I think this is mastered by Bob Bloodwick. So it sounds really good. I think it's recorded live to tape. Probably not that I would be able to tell the difference if it hadn't been, but it happens to sound really kind of like they were probably done in one take, like there's not lots of overdubs and stuff. And although it's mostly him and his guitar, there are double basses and there are other instruments going on there. And I think there might be some slide guitar and some piano and some other keyboard parts. But yeah, I just love it, and it's an album I just come back to again and again. I've been listening to it for over 10 years, and I've never got bored of it.
Great. I met Alexi once in Amsterdam. We were playing in a venue where there were multiple rooms, and he was in one room and we were in the other, and we kind of crossed in the halls in the green room. Really nice guy.
I imagine so, if his music's anything to go by. I mean, he's only ever made 2 albums and a couple of EPs, I believe. And I think there are some versions of some of his songs on a film soundtrack as well that are slight alternative takes on some of the songs. But yeah, I think he's also a visual artist. His Instagram feed is really interesting. He posts lots of beautiful photographs of the north of Scotland, lots of landscapes and seascapes and things like that. So he's a bit like me in that respect. I've got hundreds of photographs just of a sea with a flat horizon.
Yep.
Which it seems to be the same photograph I go and take all over the world, but they all look completely different in a way.
Funnily, but not funnily, that is also true with me. Most of the photos on my phone consist of water or horizon lines. So I knew we had a connection. There's a kinship between this all. One of my favorite groups of all time, and I still think the best live group I've ever heard, is Low.
Okay.
This is Secret Name, which came out on Cranky Records, I believe in the late 90s. I'm not sure. But husband and wife duo, and sadly the wife, Mimi Parker, passed away last year. But
okay,
just incredible slowcore, very somber, minimal instrumentation, guitar, bass, drums, a little bit of synth here and there, but mainly just voice. And Mimi played very sparse percussion, and they sang in these most beautiful harmonies. Some of their stuff was recorded by Steve Albini, the American recording engineer, and just pretty haunting music. If their more recent recordings, the last 3 or 4 records are a little more adventurous. Some more wilder production techniques in the studio, but the core of their sound remains the harmony and the interplay between their voices and the negative space they leave, the notes they don't play on the drum and the guitar and the bass. But highly recommended. This is Secret Name.
Yeah, I'll check that out for sure.
And the track Will the Night is top marks on here for me. Just beautiful, pretty heartbreaking, and especially now that that Mimi has passed, it's even more of a gut punch when you listen to it. All of their recordings, at least the first 5 or 6, were all analog in the recording, in the mixing, and the mastering, and they tout that with the hype sticker that says AAA. So they're very into the production quality and the playback quality, which also carries over into the live setting. So the times I've seen them live, it's just pristine, and yeah, you can't go wrong. Their earlier stuff is more sparse and more simple, and but they've recently repressed a lot of, I think their second, third, fourth, and fifth albums. They have quite an extensive catalog, but highly recommended if you like kind of slow and somber,
well, I do,
rich emotional music.
I get accused of playing kind of depressing music occasionally, but the only music I personally find depressing is kind of badly made, overproduced, kind of formulaic pop music. I find that rather depressing for probably for other kind of reasons,
I concur with that statement. What's another album for you that's been seminal in your life?
Well, an album that just stop that from falling over. The first time I ever discovered Tom Waits was when he released Swordfishtrombones. So in the 80s, I'm at art school, and I read an interview with Tom Waits. I think it was in the Face magazine, and I think it was written by a guy called Robert Elms, who's a good journalist and has a radio show on Radio London now. And basically, he travelled to America and interviewed Tom in a bar, and he kind of told the interview like a kind of story, and just kind of drew you into this kind of slightly seedy, slightly drunken, slightly melancholy world of Tom Waits, and told the story of this kind of album. And it's one of the few times I've just read a review of a record and just rushed straight out and bought it. I mean, those days, I was kind of relatively poor art student. I didn't buy records lightly. It was something I was hoping to love. So invariably, I'd buy a record and I'd play it and play it and play it until I loved it. And only one or two kind of, well, occasionally they'd get away from me and I'd either sell them on or whatever. But this one, right from the word go, just completely stuck. It just presented a kind of a version of Americana, or an American story, that felt very much like a kind of a David Lynch movie or something. And there are kind of references to that slightly in the sleeve, where he has this kind of small guy and this kind of like muscle man, and he's pulling this kind of very theatrical pose, and in the way that David Lynch's movies were often kind of populated by slightly strange characters on the outskirts of society, or slightly odd things. I remember reading something that Tom Waits said. He was in an interview or something, and the interviewer said to him, "Oh, who's your favorite band?" And he said, "Actually, my favorite band is the Salvation Army band." And you can kind of tell that when you listen. There are like strange kind of instruments that you can't identify. There's like slightly kind of howling kind of trumpet parts, and it's I mean, some of the tracks are just absolutely beautiful on here. There's a track called Soldiers Things, and Town with No Cheer, about a town where the railway doesn't go there anymore. It's kind of become a ghost town that used to be a thriving community. And there are other songs which are just really odd and bawdy, and there's like really strange little bits. Frank's Wild Years is a strange little like 1.5 minute song about a guy in Hollywood that gets so fed up with his life he torches his house and gets on the Hollywood freeway and heads north or something like that. And it's his first album on Island Records. There's another reason I have a connection to it. So my wife worked for Island Records. She worked for them when I met her. So I have a little board just beside my desk here, and there's a Polaroid of my wife with Tom Waits sitting in a bar in Paris.
I love that.
And he's such a kind of storyteller. He apparently used to. So she'd like fly him to Paris, and they'd go and set up in a hotel room, and they'd get Der Spiegel magazine coming in. Okay, you've got 30 minutes. And then at the end of the 30 minutes, you're out. In comes, another magazine, blah, blah, blah. And he'd get so bored, he'd start making up stories like, "Oh, the new album's all about my dead brother, who was abducted by aliens." Really? And the next guy comes in, this album's all about my wife that I met beside a graveyard on a soaking day. And, just a storyteller, and that album's a bit like that for me. When I was at college, we produced a magazine a long time ago, not my best work, but we produced this magazine which is called Yak. It's supposed to be that way up, and I produced a couple of pages of this magazine based on Frank's wild years, which is all set
great.
in letterpress type. So it's another,
Beautiful.
the second part of it.
Really nice.
So
That's
yeah,
great.
I have a big kind of connection with that record. Although I love Tom Waits' work anyway, it's one of my favorites for sure.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the music on that album. I've seen it before, but I've not listened to it. His voice is very, very peculiar in a very nice way. I remember,
it's definitely a kind of love it or hate it kind of voice.
yeah, and his speaking voice too. Even in the small roles he's had in some films, the films of Jim Jarmusch, are incredible and remain in my mind. Mm-hmm.
And I think he was good friends with Francis Ford Coppola, and so he's in some Coppola movies too, like he's in Rumblefish, and I think he's in The Cotton Club, and he wrote the score, of course, to the one he did with Crystal Gale, One from the Heart. Did a film score for that, which is very, very nice album.
Intriguing, man, to be certain. Yeah. My next is a man called Douglas McCombs. Doug McCombs. He is the founding member of the group Tortoise, the Chicago kind of post-jazz experimental post-rock band. He's probably the most single influential musician to me and in my own music creation. So Tortoise is his main group. He currently still plays bass with them and with a group called the Sea and Cake. He also had a side project called Pullman.
Okay.
Which is all acoustic instrumentation, instrumental music. Highly recommended. All of his stuff is on Thrill Jockey, the Chicago indie label. And then his solo stuff is under the name Brokeback, which precedes the Brokeback Mountain. So there's no association there. But this was his first full length under that moniker.
Nicely.
Really, really beautiful. Instrumental, predominantly bass guitar, bass 6, which is a 6-string bass, upright bass, a lot of field recordings and minimal percussion, and there are some vocals here and there. But pretty bizarre music. I would say there are influences of jazz for sure, but it's pretty minimal in the composition. There's not a ton going on, but it's pretty evocative, kind of filmic music. And I have a forthcoming solo project that Doug plays on, so more on that in the future. But if you're unfamiliar with Tortoise, definitely check them out. Brokeback, Pullman, and Sea and Cake. He's kind of the linchpin as the rhythmic center point on the bass, at least for all those projects. And just a fabulous musician and a really nice guy, still living in Chicago. And he has an iconic long white beard and kind of wears mid-century American workwear for his his outfit. He's kind of a character, but a very nice guy and an incredible musician, very understated. So yeah, Doug McCombs, Brokeback, Pullman, Tortoise.
Nice. What kind of age is he?
I would say he's probably in his mid 50s.
Okay.
Mid to late 50s, maybe at the most. And he actually just had a new album come out that's a new side project, also on Thrill Jockey, called Black Duck, which is nice. It's kind of surfy, sort of Western America, deserty, reminiscent of kind of like a more simplistic Calexico with no singing, but kind of surfy, kind of twangy guitars, but very tasteful. There's nothing that's like in your face about it. It's very relaxed and tempered, well tempered.
Yeah, Nice, nice. To someone like that, is he able to make a living from music?
You know, I've wondered that same thing. I would assume since he has about 4 or 5 different projects, so all of those, aggregated possibly for sure, I think, especially he's been doing it since '94 or earlier. He also has a project called the 11th Dream Day, so he's very, very busy. I think, with all those things combined, hopefully he has carved out a decent living for himself.
Yeah, yeah. It does make me kind of wonder and worry about um, just the future. Musicians, how many kind of the world has kind of changed quite a lot, and the revenue streams are kind of quite different from how they used to be.
Mhm.
Um, so it seems to me that a lot of people are kind of they're making their way by doing live performances because record sales are. I mean, maybe they've picked up a bit in recent years, but you're not going to make much money from streaming or anything like that. So
Yeah.
um,
I hope
I wonder how
hope
many
these all
people
these records.
get kind of
It
put
feels
off. You know.
it does seem like there's a trend of all these '90s and early aughts recordings getting repressed now
Mm,
20 and 25 and 30 years later as an anniversary, and with the surprise and the vinyl demand from a younger audience, which is nice to see.
yeah, yeah, for sure. And particularly if it's got a kind of positive effect on musicians actually thinking, oh, well, there's a future here for me, or there's a way I can devote all my energy to this and not have to do it
Mhm.
as a kind of side project. I was
Yeah.
speaking to a guy the other night who said, so I make work, but people refer to it as kind of like my hobby because I don't really make much money at it, and
Hmm.
it's what I have to do as an artist. You know, I have to do this stuff, and it kind of pisses me off when people say that that's my little hobby that I do in the evenings or something. But
Right, right, right.
which I can kind of
It's it,
imagine. But I was kind of saying, well, there aren't many visual artists that make a living from selling their work. An awful lot of painters
right.
who I know or I've come to contact with, kind of, they just do it because they have to do it. It's kind of in
It,
their
it
blood.
is it is inverted from the way it ought to be, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Anyway,
What's is there one more album you have there
yeah,
to share with
third
us?
one. I picked this Niels Frahm album, which is
Oh,
called
beautiful.
Screws. Do you know this album?
I do. Yep, that was the one he
Yeah,
recorded after he had broken his hand, right?
exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an album I play fairly regularly because it's just very, very quiet. And there are certain times when that's exactly what I want. And it's consistently that. There's something about the fact that I think he broke his thumb
Mm.
and was told by a doctor not to go anywhere near the piano for a while. So he cancelled all his engagements, tried to do nothing for a while, but then he just got bored and started writing pieces of music that would just involve one hand and four fingers um, late at night, which is probably why it's quite quiet as well, that he was writing them in the
Hmm.
evenings for some reason. He probably
It's a
didn't want
good
to piss his
concept.
neighbor, didn't want to piss his neighbors off too much.
Hmm.
Um, and there's something about that from my perspective as well. When you're told you can do absolutely anything on a project, sometimes it can be quite difficult to do. But when a client comes along and says, "Wait," it gives you certain limitations, like we can only afford to do this, we can only afford to print two
Hmm.
colors, it needs to be postable, or it needs to be this, or it needs to be that. Suddenly you have some kind of parameters that you can kind of push against, and it makes the
Hmm.
creative process much easier. Like there's another album he did where, again, he was writing late at night and was filling his piano full of felt, and really liked the sound of that you could hear the sound of the keys hitting as much as you could hear the notes they were producing. And
Hmm.
so wrote a whole album with his piano filled with felt to kind of dampen the sound down. I quite like that he's kind of playing around with that in a way.
Mm. Are you a fan
It's
of his? Are you a fan of his newer, more like electronic kind of compositions in the last few
yeah, I
albums?
am. I am. I saw him play a couple of years ago, and he played mostly his album. Is it called All Melody?
Mm.
Yeah, and I like it very much. Yeah, I think that's he toyed around with some electronic music earlier in his career,
Yeah.
and kind of, I don't know, for whatever reason, didn't pursue it, but he's come back to it, and I think some of it works very well. Um, some of it's a little bit hit and miss, but I think some of it's very good. I mean, I think he's perhaps puts out too much stuff. He could perhaps be a
Too
little bit
prolific.
more. He could perhaps
Yeah,
be a bit
he's.
more selective.
Mm.
Um, but certain of his albums have really struck a chord with me, and just the simplicity of one piano mic'd with
Mm.
just one microphone.
Yeah,
Um,
I really
there's a
like the solo piano stuff is quite exceptional. He's an
Yeah, there's
amazing
another album
amazing
just called
player.
Solo, which is very beautiful, which I think is recorded with a very particular piano, a very kind of big piano, or the strings are very long or something that, and he in a particular room that he loved the sound of it. So yeah, he's someone who clearly gets very obsessed about a particular sound an instrument is making in a particular
Mhm.
space, and that's just the power of just a note hanging in the air. You know what I mean? Really micro
Mhm.
focusing on on sonics in that kind of way. Yeah, I think it's really
That's
interesting,
nice.
and he does produce some really beautiful work. I mean, it is quite melancholy, that album. It sounds like he's a bit down.
L
His
long
predicament about not being able
long
to
win
play the piano.
yeah, paired with very long cold winters in Berlin, I'm sure.
Yes, exactly, exactly.
Oh,
And I first discovered him through, again, a younger guy in my office playing his little three track EP called Winter Music,
oh yeah, I love that one.
which started, I think,
Didn't
as a kind of Christmas card to his family, a kind of audio Christmas card. And they
mm,
liked it so much they persuaded him to kind of release it as a record. But I love I love that record, really. On a
I
really cold day, it's just perfect.
I remember you talking about that album in one of your videos, and driving near a river, I believe, in the wintertime.
Yeah, yeah. Driving to Hereford, driving through the
Exactly.
Cotswolds, I think, and yeah,
Exactly,
it
yep.
just struck a chord at a particular time.
Um, in the early years of Balmorhea, we did a tour with Nils and have remained friends. And actually, the album "The Wind," I don't know if you have it from
Yes, I
2021.
do. Yeah.
We recorded that at Nils's studio. So
Okay. It looks like a
um,
beautiful
he's
studio.
oh gosh, and it feels like a dream being in there. Everything is so thoughtfully restored and considered, and even the way he has it all arranged is it's it's very special
Yeah,
place if you
yeah. There are some great
ever in
photographs
Berlin.
of it in that album, All Melody. It comes with a
Mhm.
kind of booklet with photographs of the studio inside, and
Yeah,
like
I'll be curious to see.
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say the final page in that book just has like a rack with cables, and underneath it says, "And if you ever need a cable."
Huh. Oh, I didn't. I actually haven't seen that. I didn't see that. It's funny. Yeah, I'm curious to see what he does next because I know
Yeah.
he's done a lot of solo work just with piano, and now he's done kind of a lot of work with electronic music and now even some ambient, more like drone based
Mm.
experimentalism. But I'm curious to see. I know he's done a few collaborations, but I think that I don't know. Maybe something is in the wings for the future.
Yeah, definitely he must be in a position where he can take some risks because he seems to have built himself quite a big audience.
Yeah, 100%. Yes. Well, sticking on the Berlin tip, the last record I wanted to share is a contemporary composer, Johan Johansson, who,
Oh yeah.
as I do some work for film under Balmaria and my own name, some scoring for film. But I was recently reading an article my friend uh, wrote about his favorite film compositions, and I was trying to think about who's my favorite film composer, and I think it really has to be Johan Johansson. And I selected this album,
Yeah, lovely.
Orpheé, I believe it's pronounced, released on the Deutsche Grammophon label, and this is just excruciatingly beautiful music, piano and strings, electronics, pipe organ. Hilder plays cello on this, amongst the Acme Ensemble, which is an American string ensemble led by Clarice Jensen, who actually
Okay.
plays with us. You saw her play the other night with Balmorhea.
Oh yeah.
So she plays on that. Adjacent to Max Richter, if you know him, but I would venture to say Johann's music is a little more. It's deeper. It's a little more somber, and I feel like it's somehow it resonates with me more. And sadly, Johann passed away several years ago. He had an amazing body of work and a lot of music that never came out while he was alive, which is slowly trickling out. This album in particular is one of my favorites, perfect for the winter. And it also features a theater of voices. So there's some choral stuff on this. I believe this was originally composed for a dance piece. But I may be mistaken.
I think.
Do you have this one?
Well, I don't have that one actually. I've got a few of his. It's kind of on my. It's probably on my kind of wider list of things to get possibly. I once did a poster for a Philip Glass opera called Orpheé, which is based on Orpheus and the underworld, and that was performed in Germany, I think.
Oh, great!
So I guess that's Orpheé is also Orpheus, and maybe is that the same basic story of this character that passes between two worlds?
I'm not actually certain, but that sounds right.
Yeah,
so
could be.
We'll go with it.
There was I think there was a Cocteau film, or a film that was partly directed by John Cocteau called Orpheé, where characters can put on rubber gloves and then they can walk through mirrors from the world of the living into the world of the dead.
That's interesting.
Very odd.
Well, to do some research on that sounds fun. Well, the kind of last piece of this conceptual chat was to talk about maybe an album or two that is new to you or that you've recently acquired that you've been interested in lately.
Yeah. I picked a couple out, or two or three out actually. But the first one I wanted to show was I don't know if you know this artist, Arooj, Aftab.
Yeah,
I didn't know her at all until this year, and I heard one track where she's playing with I think there's a harp, and this particular album's called Vulture Prince, and I think on this particular track I heard there's violins, there's violas, there's cello, various stringed instruments and double bass. And I was like, God, what is that? I've never heard anything quite like that. Interestingly, I was looking, maybe she's more well known over there because I think she won an award. I think she was,
I think she won a Grammy last year.
I think she did. She won a Grammy, which I don't pay any attention to the Grammys usually. So that's probably why I don't know her. But yeah, it says, Grammy Award winning artist. I found this little thing which said her aim making this album was to transcend boundaries. And someone else saying it's a blend of jazz, electronica, neo-Sufi, folk, Hindustani classical music, indie pop, minimalism, and acoustic. I mean, it's pretty much got everything in there. But I think it's just a stunningly beautiful album. Her voice is amazing. And her voice, just as I was kind of thinking, okay, I've got the measure of this album. The fourth track. The fourth track is like a dub reggae track. It's like, where the hell's that come from? But again, really soft and just fits in perfectly well. And she's singing in English, but there's a really, and it's really minimal. There's just what's on the other piece? I think it's just her, a guitar, a double bass, drums, and her voice doing this really stripped back, kind of minimal, kind of dub reggae thing, which is just stunningly beautiful. I get so happy when I discover somebody new that that just instantly kind of makes me go, wow, I've got to go and get that, And again, it was my son Tom who played me one of her tracks, and he's seen her live. He played in London.
I saw Arooj. I was just going to say, a couple of months ago, I was in New York and happened to catch Arooj live with the harpist Maeve Gilchrist, which was incredible.
Yeah, I can well imagine.
But even live in a room, her voice is quite transcendent and very unique.
Yeah, indeed.
Timbre to it, beautiful.
Yeah, and it's like, a lot of bands you could say, oh, it's a little bit like this, or it reminds me of that. But it's one of those things where I just kind of like, well, she is pretty unique. I haven't really heard much like her. Maybe there are other artists which are doing similar things, but I haven't encountered them yet. But I really like it when things kind of cross genres in that way, or take elements from other cultures, like a jazz track that suddenly has like sitar playing on it or something like that. It's just really fascinating when people kind of push that, that thing around, where they'll take elements from other cultures and play with it. Yeah.
Bridging worlds. A few years ago, I started getting into audiophile reissues in jazz and classical music. So I kind of picked a couple of new acquisitions I've got to share from those two genres, which is primarily what I listen to: jazz, classical, and then kind of independent, dark, ambient, neoclassical music. But the first one is a jazz album. This is the Music Matters pressing of Grant Green's Street of Dreams.
Okay, yeah. Nice.
And this is an organ trio. It's organ, guitar, and also there's vibraphone as well, and drums. Elvin Jones on drums. It's very summery. It kind of has like a very light, kind of hazy California sunshine kind of feel to it. And this street corner on Grant and Green is in San Francisco, but I believe this was recorded at Rudy Van Gelder's in New Jersey. But just a beautiful album. And Grant, as a guitarist myself, Grant is probably my favorite jazz guitarist. Incredible. But I think, there's only four tracks total. So this is a double LP, so there's only one track per side, which is kind of nice.
Yeah,
the fidelity of all the Music Matters pressings. I think this is the only audiophile, all analog reissue of this album. All the other newer issues have been all, lesser quality. But
what label was that on originally?
This is originally on Blue Note. Okay. I think it's from the early 60s. Let's see.
I wonder if they're going to reissue that one then on Blue Note as a Blue Note classic or a tone poet or something.
It really would deserve it. This is really nice. It's kind of late afternoon, just pour a cocktail. But it is quite summery and beachy. It has kind of there's like a lightness to it. I can't really explain. It's different from his other stuff, which is a little more like New York East Coast feeling. Okay. But it's quite nice. And then lastly, this is just one I picked up yesterday, which with the boom of the vinyl resurgence and the analog stuff is the Original Source project from Deutsche Grammophon.
Oh yes.
So this is Mahler's fifth, conducted by Karajan, and I believe this was limited edition, only 2,600 pressed of this. Originally from 73, but cut from the original tapes at the Emil Berliner Studios in Berlin. I'm not the biggest fan of this cover art, but
No.
the music is exceptional, and the pressing quality. They've released 3 or 4 so far in the series, the original Source series, and I
And
think
is that recently produced or?
yes, this just came out I think a month or 2 ago.
Okay.
So, but
So you
it's
didn't have to
nice.
pay a fortune for it then?
Yeah, I think this is a double 180 gram, and there's like a really nice a printed insert and full liner notes. I think it's 60 US
Okay.
new, but
But the
if
previous one you showed, the Music Matters one, did you have to buy that after the fact?
oh yes, that was one I kind of slept on when the Music Matters were still obtainable for a decent price, but that one was one I listened to it a lot on streaming platforms, and I just really fell in love with it. And I was like, finally found one that was like sort of decently priced, and just went for it. But it's even more now. It's kind of absurd how much those are going for.
Yeah, yeah,
But
exactly.
it's it's heads above quality wise the other pressings of that.
Uh, how much percent would you say that you've heard, if you had to put
I've
a
only
number?
I don't know. I mean, it's just like night. The noise floor is so low, and the black
Mm,
space. So anytime there's quiet in the song or between tracks, it's just dead quiet. So they're all recut um, by Kevin Gray from the original tapes on his
yeah,
full tube Neumann system, the, to this beautiful restored lathe in his studio, and it basically can't get any more direct and more high quality. It's just like the most immediate direct highest quality components. Everything is just completely custom in his studio, and then pressed at RTI. All the Music Matters copies are pressed at RTI in out here near LA, which is, I think, the best pressing plant in the U.S.
yeah,
Um, so if you ever see any of those the Music Matters pressings in the wild, you can't really go wrong,
yeah.
quality
Again, I
wise.
started collecting records kind of just slightly too late, um,
Hmm.
for to get on that particular bandwagon. By the time I'd found out about them, most of them were gone. Just the 45 RPMs were left, I think, and they were kind of already skyrocketing. So, I mean, I've been very happy with the Tone Poet
Yeah,
releases, which mostly sound way better than the
yeah,
previous versions I'd had of various Blue Note records or ones that I bought in the 80s and 90s. So I've been really happy about that. Um, I don't buy them all. I tend to kind of stream them first, just check they're up my street first because there are so many. But I've got probably more than I should have. um,
yeah.
but
The,
yeah, it's a shame that Music Matters are kind of not interested in doing anymore.
yeah, I think the Tone Poet sort of stepped in as a continuation in the same spirit. Obviously, it's the same mastering engineer, and Joe Harley, who's overseeing the Tone Poet series. He was also part of Music Matter, so
Yeah,
it's
and
kind of the same. It's sort of the same thing, just
they
different titles.
gave a license to Music Matters to put them out, and then saw what was happening and kind of thought we should be doing this ourselves. So even if Music
Hmm.
Matters wanted to, they probably couldn't do it because they won't get a license to print anymore. Because
Yeah, Blue Note
I
got
guess Blue
privy to
Note
that
kind of think, well,
demand.
we should be earning that money ourselves, not giving it away.
Sure, and same with like Deutsche Grammophon. They used to lease the licenses to a company called Analog Phonic for certain all analog recuts, and now ECM has an all
Yeah,
analog project. So this is like it's cool. It's like nice that you don't have to listen to this music in a lesser form. That there is an option for the highest quality playback
yeah, for
of these
sure.
kind of classic albums from the golden era of the recording, you know,
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
technologies.
I picked another record, a recent one that I've been playing a fair bit. Oh, and, which is a modern jazz thing. This is the I guess you call it the Phi-Sonics. They're on Gondwana.
Hmm.
And do you know this band at all?
I don't. I'm familiar with Gondwana, of course, but I don't know
Okay.
that release.
I wrote some names down. So it's led by a bass player called Seth Ford Young, featuring Sylvian Cartoon on woodwinds, Mitchell Yoshida on electric piano, and Josh Colazzo on drums. Yeah, and they're based in LA. Um,
Hmm.
and it's very soulful. It's quite classical in places in a way. Again, it's kind of like playing with the borders between um,
Hmm.
jazz and classical music slightly. Um, and it feels very kind of spiritual. It feels like it was perhaps recorded in a church or a kind of real space with
Hmm.
some actual natural reverb or something going on. Maybe I'm not sure. Um,
What
uh,
year did that
and
come out?
it's just out this year. It's
Hmm.
their second album that I'm aware of, and I think it's better than their first album.
Great.
I think it's quite interesting that the kind of band or the ensemble is led by a bassist, because the bass feels slightly higher in the mix than it often is. Um, I don't know whether
Preferential.
that's got something to do with it or not. I mean, I do find that with some of the older um, jazz records, that sometimes the bass gets a bit kind of hidden in the mix.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
like some of the kind of John Coltrane things, it feels like he's definitely been pushed like way out front, and some of the other stuff is kind of quite resurgent, and you're kind of like,
Hmm.
I mean, if you took the bass away, you'd know it, but um, it feels like a slightly different presentation on some of the newer jazz things I've got. Anyway, that there's a slight kind of rebalancing of that, like rather than having a star, Miles Davis has got to be front and center
Hmm.
in the way that those things were sometimes done. Some of the more modern ones, I think, feel like the balance is slightly different. And I mean, I listen to a lot of jazz, and for quite a while, my jazz collection seemed to be mainly dead people. Which, if you're interested in seeing live music, which I am, is like a real bummer, really.
Right.
Um, like I can't bear a drum solo on record, but in live in the place, it makes perfect sense somehow.
Yeah. Totally.
Um, and so anyway, pursuing kind of younger living jazz artists, yeah, it's been a real kind of rich vein for me, really, and being able to see them play live. Uh, I mean, it helps living in a city where lots of bands do come and play.
Yeah.
Um, but
Are are you
yeah,
familiar with Jeff Parker? Do you know that
Jeff
name?
Jeff Parker. I don't know Jeff Parker. No.
He's a guitarist. He is also in the group Tortoise, who I mentioned earlier.
Okay.
He releases solo music on the Nonesuch label.
Oh yeah, I know none
He
such.
now lives in Los Angeles and has an impromptu, I don't know what you call it, an improvisational quartet that plays kind of like a standing gig at this small jazz bar in a neighborhood called Highland Park. But I think they would play it every Monday during in the end of the pandemic era. They were playing a lot, and they made a compilation recording of some of the choice pieces from several performances, and that was pressed to vinyl. And that's some of the best newer jazz music I've ever heard,
Oh really?
and especially seeing them live. No one plays over each other. It never gets too bombastic. It's very very tasteful, very considered. Upright bass, alto sax, guitar, and drums.
Mm.
It's
So
we'll put a
a
link below,
pretty
but
classic
I'll send it
lineup
to
in
you.
that sense.
It's incredible. It's some of the most like palpable energy I've felt in a live music space in a long, long time. Highly
Mm.
recommended Jeff Parker.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'd love to hear that. And do they travel much?
They just did a European tour. I don't know if they came to London. I think
Okay.
they literally just a couple weeks ago I saw that they were in Europe with playing as that quartet. But well, I hope one day we can sit in one either here or there and listen to some records
That would be
and
great.
have a glass of nice wine and
Sounds
muse on the beauty of music.
that sounds like a good thing to anticipate.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, this is so fun. Thanks for sharing. I have some homework to do
okay.
uh,
Yeah,
in your
it's
recommendation.
getting later here, so I need to go and eat. But
Yes, that sounds good. Well, we'll talk to you soon. Thanks so much, David.
yeah, thank you,
Okay. Bye.
and be in touch.
Will do. Bye.
Okay, bye for now. Bye.